Podcasters Roundtable round 128, the no title round. I didn't have time to make a title. Who's got time for titles? I mean, it's not like they're searchable or anything, so who cares, right?
Reminds me of the old Joe Walsh had an album called "You Bought It, You Name It." So
nice.
You're listing, you name it.
That's right. I know you paid a lot for this round, so your expectations are not being met. I apologize greatly for that. But we have some good stories. We have one new roundtabler as of now. Maybe the other one will jump in. We'll find out. Time zones may have bit us in the backside. We're trying to keep the international vibe going on. But let's get to the roundtablers. Dave, co-host, welcome back.
Yeah, Dave Jackson from the schoolofpodcasting.com, celebrating 14 years of podcasting with my buddy Ray and Josue tonight. So looking for a good time.
That is amazing. You are just about as old as podcasting.
Almost. Missed it by a couple months. So
yeah. And now we know why Dave has failed in podcasting. He was too late.
It's too late. It's it.
Can you start a show in 2019 and still succeed? No. You needed to start in 2005. All right. Anyone who's watching this will not take that seriously at all. Like,
hopefully not.
Yeah. I've new people be like, oh, wow, I am too late.
I missed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe when we get the same number of podcasts as we have blogs, then we could be like, yeah. No, we get so far to go on that one. All right, new roundtabler, Josue. Look at me screwing that up. I tried to say it fast. I should have slowed down. Welcome to the roundtable.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Josue Cardona from geektherapy.com.
Geek Therapy. Yeah, your stuff sounds good. Always when a new roundtable comes on, I go to check it out. And I'm trying to remember, you have a bunch of stuff there, right?
Yeah. I mean, it started like most of us, right? It started as one podcast 7 years ago, so half of Dave's time, and eventually that grew to there's 24 content creators on the network now. We're from around 13 shows. I call them projects now because I try to encourage people to stop thinking of long-term shows and be like, listen, do you want to do like a 10-episode season of something? Let's experiment. Let's do something new. So we're up to 13 published and 5 in the works that'll be out by the end of the year. So,
I kind of like that idea, like projects, right? I mean, Dave, we were chatting at the beginning. I don't know. We made a joke about starting and how you're going to create a group of people who just hadn't quite started yet.
Yeah. But the almost podcasting roundtable.
Yeah. But, that is sometimes the limitation is it's too overwhelming, or I don't have time to start a show that I can't miss an episode on, right? Like for 2 years from now, I'm going to still be podcasting. But if you sort of couch it as this 10-episode project, then someone might gets a good chance to even figure out, oh, you know what? I want to keep going, right? And I don't think anyone who listens to that would be opposed to you keeping going, right? So that's a good idea. I like that. So with the network, so you started it and it grew into a network?
Yeah. But by the time I had 3 shows, I said, let me just put them all together because they were kind of born one out of the other. So then I just started calling it the Geek Therapy Network. And then someone from our community contacted me and said, hey, can we join the network? I was like, whoa, I didn't even think of that. It was just my thing. But yeah, that would be great. And so a lot of what I do is behind the scenes, encouraging people. Anytime anybody's like, I really wish I could do a podcast, I'm like, you can. And then we try to share resources and I try to help them out. And it's a lot of just encouraging.
Yeah, you are part-time podcaster and full-time life coach is what happens when you start a network.
pretty much, yeah.
That's cool though. I mean, you said you had 3 shows that you combined to one. Are you saying that all 3 shows just became one show?
Oh no, the first 3 shows. Once we hit 3 shows, I was like, oh, let's call it a network. Okay. Let's not just say my 3 independent shows.
Got you. So all under the same network umbrella, because they had a similar niche.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, all right. So these aren't in the stories, but anytime I find someone who's running a network and has been doing it for 7 years, it's a good conversation point. So, are you monetizing that network?
Yes and no. The Patreon is doing enough to cover the cost of the network.
Yeah.
And then we've done some sponsorship tests so far. So at a discount with, to just get people started. We have some merch that we sell. So it's not a lot, but definitely probably more than I ever imagined we'd make. So
what are the costs of a network?
So like I do a VPS to host all the websites, and they're all on WordPress, and they all do PowerPress. And then we're like, a lot of the projects are independently produced. So even though we're under the same banner, some of us share resources and some of us don't. So some people host their own files on their own Podbean. Some people don't. Like, some people, I use a cast account for a few shows. Some people use their own cast account to record and edit. So it's kind of a mess. It's a little bit of everything. It depends on how much anybody needed, right? Like, somebody who needed 100% support, then we're sharing resources from the main show. But it's a beautiful mess.
I was going to say, it's not a mess. It's diversification. You are.
That's it.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, hey, if anyone has interest in starting a network, it sounds like Josue could help you out with at least his experience. That's what we do here. We just see, that's the key. Like, I don't know, Josue, I don't know if one of your shows is a show about podcasting, but most people do not have a show where they can share podcasting tips. Although I feel like any kind of geek related show, you do end up having some conversation about gear or, you know, stuff we're into. But hopefully we can bring people on to share those tips. But yeah, definitely get in touch with him if you're interested. I don't run a network. Dave, did you ever try to be a network with your mass of shows?
Not a real network, no. I mean, I have the Power of Podcasting network, but the only reason I made that is when people would go, well, how many shows do you have? And I didn't expect them to remember 8 different addresses. And I just go to powerofpodcasting.com. You'll see them all there. So that's really the only reason I do that. And I play a little jingle now at the beginning of my shows. So if somebody, because some people just don't know I do so many different shows, and in not a ton, but on occasion, someone will go, oh, I finally went over and I'm listening to this show, or I like this show. So it's just a little bit of cross promotion, but I've never, really super duper cross promoted. It's just a little jingle here and there. And that's really the only reason I have it, is so if somebody says, well, where can I find all your stuff? It's like, oh, powerofpodcasting.com.
Yeah, I think it's important because it is amazing how long you can listen to maybe one show and not realize they do other shows unless they say it. I mean, then I think still the number one way people find new podcasts is that it's a podcast mentioned on another podcast you're already listening to, right? And so, yeah, I mean, that is one of the powers of a network, is to be able to share, cross-promote your other shows in the network and help them grow. And I think the audience digs it, because if it's under that same niche umbrella, then it's probably stuff that they might be interested in. So you definitely, it is a good, interesting way to do it. I've had a few shows running at once, and I put everything under like, look, if you want everything, and that includes YouTube and like just all the places I put content, then it doesn't even necessarily mean it's a podcast. It's just under Ray Ortega. So myself, so it's not a network, but it is a good idea to have a place you can send someone to get sort of all your stuff, because as you can see, start a podcast or two. It is my fault, Dave. I was watching an old episode where you blame me for multiple people having multiple podcasts, and you're right. I don't think I took enough ownership at the time.
Well, you mentioned that though, but I remember when I first started, I had my podcast for musicians, and then I started the School of Podcasting, and I would have people that would say, oh, I'm listening to your musicians podcast. I'm like, oh, cool. What do you play? And they're like, oh, I don't. I think you're funny and I like the way you talk. And I'm like, what? So so people will just go to listen to you just because they like you. So
for sure. When I discovered podcasts, by the way, if you didn't know that, when I discovered it for myself, I was one of the first shows. I was just telling this story to someone like in real life, not this virtual box we live in. That one of the first shows I listened to was an ultra light backpacking podcast where they would podcast up and down like the Pacific Crest Trail or whatever these long hikes they would take. And I had no plans to do this. I had never been interested in it before. Some reason I love listening to the podcast. So it goes to the fact that you can't really predict what someone's going to like. So put it out there. If you're doing other stuff, find a way to cross promote it on the podcast that you are already doing. Like if you have more than one, find a tie-in and promote it on your podcast. Because I think that word of mouth, that is the way. This is the way you see huge networks do this, right? Like Gimlet will put a show right in the feed.
Yeah.
A whole show, just because they are playing off the success they had of one show. I think Gimlet exists because Startup was a freak accident blow-up show, right? Like I loved it, everyone loved it, and then they built on top of it. I don't think they expected to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think it was there was This American Life, and then Alex was part of Planet Money, and somehow those two ganged up to launch Startup. And then, of course, the other thing that doesn't hurt is when all of your friends in the media help promote your show.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot more factors there. I mean, but the key there is he was doing Startup to document the process of starting a network or like his own company of podcasting. But they got lucky, and then this sort of behind the scenes thing was the thing that caught on. And I think it drove most of their other success, because it's just weird. Like, who knows what would have happened if he didn't record the behind the scenes, which is what kind of went viral and got picked up, because it was different. You're like, oh, we're hearing this Startup as it's being formed. And I really think they got lucky, even with their assets of being able to be promoted on NPR or This American Life or something. Their first show might have not landed the way the other show was, but they certainly took advantage of it and built and made sure you knew what other shows were on the network. And every time, we see this across other networks as well. When they launch a new show, they definitely push. All right, so let's get to a story. I'm going to let you discuss that. Dave, why don't you give us a story, maybe one of Josue's, and I'll try to get Heather in here, because
Heather is in the chat room.
Yeah.
So
work on that. You work on a story.
Yeah. So Josue, you have one here. Let me copy this. I'll put this in the chat room about meet the people who listen to podcasts crazy. What do they define as crazy fast?
Ooh, that's anywhere from 2x and up speed. So, I really want to talk about this one.
By the way, I'm a purist in this form. I have this debate with my wife all the time. It drives me insane. I'm one times for life, baby. Go on.
Really?
Yes, you insane people. I don't know what you're doing, but you're changing. It's like watching a movie on fast forward. It makes no sense. You're losing all context. I just hit my mic arm. I'm crazy about this, so I won't go there. I was so crazy I was going to make a T-shirt about it, just like the one Dave's wearing. Nothing to do with corners, which is an interesting hashtag. But if you're not watching this, which you should be, Podcasters Roundtable on YouTube, so youtube.com/Podcasters Roundtable. You should subscribe and watch. At least check in. Dave's holding up a shirt that says #Corner Talk.
Yes. Darren Dake does the Corner podcast. Yeah. Corner Talk. And if you like CSI stuff, Darren is an actual corner and talks about all sorts of gruesome dead stuff.
If you ever wondered about the power of podcasting and being niche, that you found it, man. That's it. Which I love. Like, you're not going to serve that audience on Discovery Channel. Maybe one episode, but not a whole podcast. I interrupted. One times for life. Go ahead.
As I look, I'm listening to Mark Maron at 2X. And depending on, and it's not always a reflection, but there are sometimes the more likely I am to not really get much out of the podcast, the more likely I am to listen at a faster rate, because I'm more or less skimming. In the same way that I would skim a blog, I am skimming that. But then there are other times I just listen fast because either in some cases, the person just talks really slow, and at 2X they sound normal. Or
when you go to their live show in person, because my wife does this, everyone sounds drunk. You're ruining the experience, people. Like you're making life hyper real. It doesn't exist that way. This drives me crazy. Good topic, Josue.
Yeah, I look at this.
Don't watch.
Go ahead. But as I look at this, I have 136 episodes waiting for me to listen. That's another reason why I'm listening at 2X. But Josue, you said you're very passionate about this, so let it rip.
I am. I listen to almost every episode of this show, but I never watch it live because I rather listen to it at 2.5x afterwards. And I'm like that with most things. 2.5 is my sweet spot.
That is so fast. I am so scared to know what I sound like at 2.5. It's got to be Chipmunk Crazy City, man.
So to me, it sounds, this article is actually really great because they talk to a neuroscientist who says that like your brain just adapts.
You've trained your brain. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
It's like, it's super fast though. Like when I hear you at 2.5x on my headphones, you sound to me like you sound now.
That's crazy. Like your brain is adjusting to like adjust my voice to be. That's crazy.
What's fun is when you go to bed and the last thing you listen to was like at 2.5 and then you wake up in the morning and you hit play, and it's like you don't understand a single saying. It just sounds like.
I hope
you're
you
like,
dream. I hope you dream at 2.5 and it really messes you up.
You can have more dreams. I don't know. One
There you
time,
go.
me and my girlfriend were
That's
listening
true.
to the same exact podcast episode, and she was listening to it at 1.5x on a speaker in the kitchen, and I was listening to it on my headphones as I came home. And I asked her, "What are you listening to?" And she told me, and I was like, "Oh, we're listening to the same exact thing," but I didn't realize it because she was at 1x and I was at 2.5. And I vary. Like audiobooks, I can go up to 3x depending. If someone speaks faster, I'll lower it a little. But yeah, like I don't usually listen to anything at 1x.
So what else does the article say about this? Besides, we've trained our brains adapt, which is
Well,
I
it
don't
says
like
that it says that Marco Armin, he says that on Overcast, only about 1% of people use 2x speed or higher, which so you're in the majority.
It leaves faith for me in humanity that these people are not going crazy doing this crazy stuff.
well,
It
here's the
mentions an app
thing.
here that it will go up to 10x. I mean,
What?
That's
it's an
nuts.
interesting article. Yeah.
Holy cow!
Well, I found there's a Chrome extension that a lot. Like I watch Game of Thrones at 1.4. I watch a lot of Netflix at 1.3.
you watch shows.
I've done
Yeah.
it. I've done it.
The other night, I have
Is
a
the
treadmill.
extension called "Ruin My Life"? Take all the artistry out of my existence.
Suck all the artistry out of my content. Yes,
Man.
but it's funny because when I go to my actual living room and watch things on an actual TV, I'm like, oh, this is so slow. I can't take it.
I know.
So, yeah.
Okay, so Heather is in
Yay.
here. I think I responded. I sent Heather a link to myself. Man, it didn't work out at all. I'm so sorry. Heather, welcome to the Roundtable.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, although I'm late. Sorry.
That's
No,
all right.
you're not late. You're late because of me. So I think you're just in time because I think you were in the chat adding to this conversation. I'm going to turn you. Do you have the ability to turn yourself up a little bit or not?
Yeah.
Okay. If you bring yourself up a little, I think that'll help.
How's that?
Yeah. And I'm going to make some adjustments here on the back end. So if you see me turning you up if you're ever on the round table and you see me playing with your levels, ignore it. Everything's going to be okay. And Heather, can you move your camera over a little bit? Because when it goes to a little square, I lose you. So.
It's weird when she talks, she's fine.
It's because it's like 16 by 9.
Yeah.
Anyways, there we go.
And then Heather, where are you? What's your podcast?
Sunshine and Power Cuts is the name of it.
Sunshine and Power Cuts. Is that sunshineandpowercuts.com or dot?
That's it. Yep.
So what
Very
is okay? So I don't know what that means by the name of it. So which is a topic we should let's do roundtable stuff and just divert and go with what comes up.
Right.
Because I want to know more about that. First of all, what's the podcast about?
It's about living off the grid in New Zealand. So the simplest definition was it's about sunshine and power cuts. I rely on solar power for power.
Got it. Well, see, I'm not intelligent, so I didn't pick up on that. But now it makes total sense. So when you list that in, say, your feed or Apple Podcasts, wherever that shows up, do you use how do you make it clearer and then optimize for the keywords? Because someone's probably not searching for those, maybe not those 2 keywords. I don't know. How do you optimize so that people find you, or are you?
They would have to kind of know what they were looking for. So yeah, it's tricky. It's not easy. The tags I use are like off grid and things like that in the background. But yeah, sunshine and power cuts is not something someone's going to type in specifically unless they already know what they're looking for.
She has a Q2U and it sounds fantastic. I've used I have that fairly expensive metal pop screen. I don't know if yours is expensive, but it's typically more expensive than the average like nylon one you get. And I've never used it because for me, this is an interesting thing. For me, it creates a whistle because my voice is stupid, I guess. And as my S's go through metal, it whistles. Like it's crazy, but it sounds great on you. So congrats.
Thank you.
Good setup. And she has a windscreen on top of that. So don't be
That's
afraid of plosive protection, people. Like that's so important, I think. So anyways, Dave, a little time for a little coaching here, Dave.
Okay.
What would you say to Heather to make sure her show is optimized? You know, this is common. People don't always want to pick a title, and there's not enough titles left to be able to be so like in your face. And Apple gives us a limited ability to have our show be found, right, through search. And it used to be, then we just got in trouble and this is a weird thing because I don't think they're actually punishing people. We just got in trouble for putting sort of descriptors,
Right.
subtitles in our title tag. Do you want to do an impromptu coach and tell her and help us figure out how we're going to take a title that is not in your face and make sure it's found?
Well, I would definitely have the phrase. See, it's tough because, well, no, she could have like make sure off the grid, like make an episode about being off the grid.
Yeah, that's all. That's it.
And
It's episode.
Yeah. So, because you can't put it in your author tag, you can't put it in your title tag, and so it's going to be in your title of your episode because your description of your episode isn't searched, unfortunately. Because
the description of your episode, the description of your podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a subtitle tag. How nice if they actually used that, right?
I get that question about 3 times a week. Where does this go? And I go, when you find it, let me know because I can't figure it out.
It's in iTunes desktop software, and one of the things you probably don't even have selected. Like it's just it's useless.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's excellent. So, anyways, Heather, do you have? So, I imagine you have episodes that speak to all these things. So, maybe did you know about the titles of episodes being searchable? Therefore, you could optimize that way.
Yeah, so I have an introduction to my off-grid setup. So I have used words that people will look for. Yeah.
Nice. No, okay. So, are you living off the grid completely, like right now?
Yeah.
Now,
Solar power all the way.
Wow. How much solar does it take to, like, is it going to go out on us as we're right here? Like, look, I'm going with the ignorant, stupid questions right now.
How much solar?
I'm still here. I have a battery bank of storage, so we should be good.
Is it a Tesla battery? Who makes those batteries?
No, unfortunately, it's not. They're really expensive here, just to buy them and then get them installed. So I have a custom built system.
Wow. So what made you go that route with the just living off the grid?
Building a house initially didn't have power to the site, and it was going to cost way too much money, and the bank wouldn't actually allow the mortgage to extend any further. So the cheaper option was to do something else, and we went alternative with solar power and a battery bank.
I love it. Like they have these prefab homes that I just want to like get one, plop it down in the woods somewhere, and then like have it be self-sufficient where I don't have to connect to the grid. So I'm probably going to start listening to that podcast, and then I'm probably going to start writing a manifesto, and that's where things go wrong. But no, it's come on, it's not like that. Awesome. All right. So hey, what do you have to say about this whole enraging fast speed debate?
Do you listen at 1x
are you
or
1x
2x?
pure X or?
I listen to like audiobooks at higher speeds, but podcasts, some of them, like mine, isn't meant to be listened to at more than 1 times. Like mine is, I have different episodes. I'm kind of doing things all backwards with my podcast, but the part of my episodes are meant to be listened to at 1 times, and so maybe 1.5 I can manage for other people's podcasts, but I'm not terribly fast.
Wait, you have to tell me more about it. Part of your episodes are meant to be heard. Do you tell people that?
Yep. So I have 2 types of episodes that alternate. So I have sunshine ones. I've used the title of my podcast to split my podcast into 2 episodes. Sunshine ones are drawing inspiration from nature because I have to rely on nature to give me power. And then the power cut ones are the actual insights into what it's like living off the power grid. So the sunshine ones are mindfulness ones that are 1 times speed.
By the way, she said she's doing everything like backwards on her podcast. I think you're doing everything right because the one thing I just want to see more people trying things that are considered backwards because the podcast allows for that, right? Like go crazy. Josue, you sound like you're nodding. You dig it.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love the experimentation. Yeah. Do it. There are no rules.
There are no rules, people.
That's true.
Yeah.
We're going to hang on. Dave must be pirate radio inspired because he started when podcast started. So we're hanging on to that. You're not going to take our RSS.
That's it. Doggone it. We're going to stick it to the man. That was the other thing. Back in 2005, it was all about, we're not going to be radio. We're going to just go crazy. And so.
Break the rules, people.
That's it.
If there are none, how do you break them? But a different conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, is that it? Is that all we have to say about is that all the article has to say or?
Well, what was the one thing from Marco? You said it was only 1% of people listen at a faster rate?
Higher than 2.
On Overcast, he says, yeah.
But that's 2. You said higher than 2 times. So there might be a large percentage of people listen at 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know.
Because the other thing that will slow me down is like I like Colin Gray who does the podcast host, I think it is.
Oh yeah.
But he's got that majorly thick Scottish accent.
Yeah.
So that's one where I'm like, whoa, we got to slow that down just a little bit.
When I listen in Spanish, I need to slow it down a little. I can't do it
yeah.
at 2.5. Yeah.
I do wonder if the fast speed thing is more of our sort of community, like sort of the people in the know. Like, I wonder if most people, the average listener, even knows that's an option.
So YouTube has a speed option too.
That's true.
Exactly. And like
I do that also. But it doesn't sound as good. Like Overcast sounds amazing when you speed it up and it doesn't change the pitch. But in YouTube it doesn't sound that great. I still do it, but it doesn't sound as good.
Now, do you think, are you ADD? What is wrong with you people? Is this the problem? What does this not does this not is it to cram
yes, but
more
that doesn't
content?
matter.
Is it to cram more content in, or is it to so you can like go out and run in the park? Like, why are you doing this to me?
For me, it's just I want to blow through the content. I look down and I'm like Heather. I got an audiobook I want to listen to, but I just had 7 podcasts about podcasting download, and I want to see if there's any chocolatey goodness in any of these. So I'm just blowing through. All right,
so you're just all business. In your case, it's all business. Like. Yeah. I want you to like sit back with the podcast you love, take your time. It's time to take some time out with your life. Come on, people, chill. Maybe it's just because I'm from California.
So the ADD question is funny because I did get a diagnosis of ADHD as an adult, and one thing that I did realize was that the speed of certain things, like when it is faster, I can focus on it more easily than if it's slow. I'm more likely to focus on it. If it's too slow, my mind might wander.
Oh,
so that was a part of it. Yeah,
that's good. But you're making me feel bad. So I'm like, oh, there's a legit reason, a medical reason. I lose.
But also, I want to listen to all the podcasts. Yeah. So that's why.
I get it.
Yeah,
I get it. Awesome. All right, I think we've pummeled that horse. Pommeled that horse.
Sure.
It's not Olympic season. It's be a 2020 joke. All right. What else we got? Heather, let's go to one of yours. Which one do you like better, the sleep timer or the difference between radio and podcasters, which I think I'd like to know more about, but
I like that one.
Oh, cool. Tell us what that one's about.
So I think it was James Cridland did an article about the difference between radio and podcasting because he's kind of branching over both of those areas. And I don't know a whole lot about the radio industry itself, but I do have to agree that I think podcasters do tend to like each other. There tends to be a lot of pod fam and pod friends and ways people describe about their podcast connections. And yeah, I think it's a really supportive community.
You think that the podcast community is really supportive?
Yeah.
More so
of
than
each other.
Do you think that differs from the radio community? I mean, you don't know because
I don't know exactly how that works, but it seems to be perhaps they're sort of within their radio network thing, whereas you can branch out and talk to people more easily, perhaps across different podcasting genre and things. And there are groups full of podcasters, and the Podcasters Roundtable was a bunch of podcasters getting together to talk about the thing and make it better for people. And you don't see or hear that as much about radio, perhaps.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a function of like if it's the function of having a medium that is the internet, right? Like that we're more connected, or that we work together because we can do things like a hangout to like produce something. I don't know. What do you guys think? Dave, why do you think, do you think the podcast community is more connected than say maybe like a radio community?
Yeah, I think part of it is in podcasting, and this is where people go, wait, hold on. But in podcasting, I always say there's no competition because you can listen to me on Monday, you can listen to Ray on Tuesday, listen to Daniel on Wednesday, listen to Paul Colgan on Thursday.
You can if you listen at 2.5, apparently.
Exactly.
I can't.
Where with radio, we're both on at 7:30. And now that is true competition. So there might be a little more kind of, at each other with that. He does say in the article, he says, radio has unprecedented competition, yet the radio industry continues to fail to work together. He goes, we offer a complicated view of our businesses to advertisers, auto manufacturers, or even receiver manufacturers. And we don't call out the press when they post another Lazy Buggles headline. I don't know what a Lazy Buggles headline is, but okay.
Like a Harry Potter joke?
I don't know, but he's saying the fact that we do, and this has been from day one when podcasters get together and somebody goes, how do I grow my audience? nobody says, well, hold on a second. What's your show about? I want to make sure you're not my competition.
Right.
It's always like, oh, well, what are you doing? And, oh, don't do, here's a better way to do it. And that whole 9 yards. We're always just, I think we come from mainly because it's true. We have so much room for more listeners that we just know we're not like at any, we're not at full capacity. It's not like, okay, we have all the listeners we're going to get, so everybody grab your piece of what we got. It's like, no, there's more listeners coming. So I think that might be part of it.
I think there's no support structure, infrastructure, the way radio has it, right? Like there's a lot of times there's not a need to reach out. Whereas in the beginning, I mean, Dave and I listen to Dave because I'm getting podcast tips because I'm starting a podcast. And, I'm talking to other podcasters on this show because it's content and we're sharing. So, a lot of times we're coming to this alone, and we're coming to it from not a background of doing production. So we need each other a little bit more. This could go to, do you see radio that goes into podcasting, or even corporations that go into podcasting that clearly have a big team behind them? Are they in the podcast community? I feel like we're starting to see it filter into like conferences like Podcast Movement, where we see them come to the community. But I feel like a lot of them, there's no need. Like if there's not a need to then be in the community, like I need something from podcasters, then they're not. I don't know. So I feel like that probably plays a huge role. I feel like as independents, podcasters or content creators, we need each other a little bit more, or that we enjoy the help a little more, because it's like a, like a virtual sort of support group and system to help.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, if you're on the radio, you're probably getting paid.
Yeah.
And if you're a podcaster, maybe your livelihood isn't at stake. I know I've never made money. I know a lot of people do make money off of their podcasts, but a lot of people don't. And I think that completely changes the dynamic when you're with other people who are doing it for the love of it, because they wanted to.
You have a good example, right? You told us in the startup that people reached out to you and be like, "Can I be part of your network?" Right? This doesn't happen in a system that sort of gives you the network.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think at the heart of almost every podcaster, it's somewhat of a need, or at least a want, to serve your audience. In some cases, there's always the, 3 guys, 1 brain show, and they just want to have fun talking to each other. And I think, this is pure, what's the word, conjecture. I think a lot of radio people probably get in there because they love music, but they end up serving their program director, who is giving them all these rules to, like, you got to hit traffic and weather on the 10s and say your call numbers every 20 minutes and then he's got advertisers that they've got to make sure they're happy. And I think after a while, things just get muddy on the radio side, and I have nothing to base that on. I've talked to a few people in radio, and it just sounds, I have more respect for people in radio because their hands are tied behind their back. They're like, okay, you get 7 seconds from 8 to 8:02. Please be funny and play a song. And you're like, wait, what? I'm like, holy cow. So, but the other thing is that I've heard, not a lot, but I've thought, and I wish I could remember the guy, there are people in radio that are kind of like, well, podcasters, thanks for getting us this far, but we're here now, and we'll take it from here, guys. Go ahead and go back to your, you nerds, go ahead. And I forget the article I read, but the guy actually said, they're like, all right, we're here. We got it. Thanks, guys. We'll take it from here. And that's always an attitude. I've wondered if that's there because, of course, they're, we're on the radio and you're not. So I have seen that once, but I've also met some really cool radio people that just love interacting with an audience. So I think we both can learn a lot from each other. I think they can learn from us, and I think we can learn things from them, because if you have to be entertaining with so many things tied behind your back, we can definitely learn from them. So
that brings up the idea of is there a problem where we push away each other? Because we talk about no competition in podcasting, but do we somehow perceive radio as like a threat? Or Dave, you just talked about pirate radio, like we're giving it to the man. We are not radio. So is there some like inclination to be like, back off? And on the radio side, it's like, here's this invasion. Oh, everybody can broadcast now, right? Like, so it feels like there's sort of this natural headbutting thing that's been created. And I'm not sure that we don't have some like resistance to each other to sort of break through. Obviously attitudes like that don't help, but I think that attitude exists on both sides, that, you know, some podcasters are resistant to, you know, radio people because big networks invade, they have resources. I used to use the word invade. Like that's not really true. It's not an invasion, right? NPR's been here since the beginning. Kudos to them. But I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that do we sort of have a bias towards radio verse podcasters? Heather, do you think we create our own natural competition between the two?
What I think's interesting is that I've noticed just here in New Zealand that a lot of indie podcasters connect and communicate with each other a lot more, whereas the radio podcasts, for example, are sort of their own element, and they haven't blended the same as just within amongst the indie community itself. So yeah, I don't know what that is, whether it's a them versus us thing or just not. We don't have events here to get together and do things, so perhaps it's that.
Need an
Yeah.
event. You need to start that.
Yeah.
Even a meetup group. Do you have I don't know how big I don't know how big the community is and how hard people are spread out. I don't know. That might be difficult. Maybe it's harder to
We're
create a
pulling together
community.
more podcast listeners to get together. There's a podcast brunch club in Wellington, which I happen to host. So that's
Oh,
pretty
perfect.
awesome. But it's a small
Nice.
group so far, and it's in Wellington, which is the capital city. I did that on
Nice.
purpose to try and be able to pull more of an audience. So
Completely.
hopefully,
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. Oh, congrats on that. So that's good. All right.
I could
go
see
ahead.
where a radio person might, because there's an actual report from Edison called Share of Ear.
Mhm.
And that's part of it. It's like radio. And for the record, radio still dominates in terms of how many people are listening on a regular basis. I mean, we are still a crumb, but the problem is that crumb gets bigger every year and radio gets smaller every year. So you just look at it and go, well, I'm not sure when, but eventually those two are going to cross. So I'm sure there's a part of them that kind of goes, that could be an issue.
I have a question. I want to know with that stat, are people listening to music or talk? And we're very different. Like, you don't podcast music necessarily. I mean, there are music podcasts, but in general, it's AM radio, right? It's a conversation, it's a dialogue. So does AM radio dominate over podcasting? I want to know where we're pulling up alongside talk radio versus podcasting. I don't care about music. Like, that's a different category, because then we're talking radio music versus Pandora, Spotify or something, right? Which then opens its own conversation to podcast, but we won't go there. So that's what I want to know. I don't think you have that answer.
I do.
Wait, you do?
Why? For me, the reason, if you listen to AM
Not for
radio
you.
lately,
Yes, I love baseball, so of course I listen to AM radio. So I don't get baseball.
But if you listen to non-sports on AM radio, like, I was laughing because they play a lot of like old, like, big band music and stuff like that.
I mean, I'll listen to
And
NPR on FM. So
it always sounds like this on AM radio. Thank you for
Yes,
that.
right.
I'm like, so that's when I'm like, yeah, we have a leg up on AM radio, but
that's that's when they talk about these numbers, like, yes, so many more people listen to the radio still, but what does that? They listen to music. Is not even that's not a comparison. Like,
right, because one is
talk radio.
What's the phrase? Radio is a laid back type of listening where you hit play and you sit back in your cubicle and just let it go. It's a laid back kind of experience, where podcasting is more of an upfront. But yeah, exactly, because it's music. Where podcasting, I can't listen to podcasts at work because I want to take notes. I'm like, wait, what was that? Oh, that sounds cool. Hold on. So I can't listen to podcasts at work. I can listen to music and I can listen to the radio. I actually listen/watch I turn it on in the morning, the local, morning zoo, Rover's Morning Glory. And I turn it on just because I go, good God, that's awful. And then I turn it off.
Heather or Josue, when do you listen to podcasts?
So like all day, every day until I fall asleep. It's very bad. But
during
work?
Like,
I'm thinking, yeah. I mean, if it's the type of work that it's like more monotonous.
Work,
yeah. But what you said about the radio versus the podcast, like, what about NPR, where they have these shows that are on the radio, but then they're also very popular in podcast form? I'm curious if they've ever released numbers about which ones, like, where are some of those shows more popular? I think This American Life is still on the radio, right? But it's a super popular podcast.
It's a great question. I was just watching a YouTube video, so this is not podcast, but I think it completely relates. And it was it's a channel called Colin and Samir, which is a cool channel. And a YouTuber this woman who's a YouTuber just got a late night show. It's Jimmy Fallon, Seth Meyers, and a YouTuber. Like she's taking over for Carson Daly. It's the first time she started on YouTube. I mean, it's amazing, right? So it's a cool thing for diversity, and it's for all kinds of reasons. It's really awesome. But they were talking about how I think Fallon, like they reach, I think she reached like some number of billion people on YouTube last year, and like Fallon will reach like those late night shows will reach millions. So essentially, I mean, if you've ever watched like Jimmy Fallon, you've probably watched it like on a YouTube clip. That these shows now, their numbers on YouTube are actually bigger than their broadcast network numbers. They're reaching more people. And so it's like, is a YouTuber coming to broadcast, or is NBC just hyper producing a YouTube channel? Fascinating, right? And now we got Spotify and Pandora getting in the business, and we're seeing Spotify. So, with those numbers, like where is it actually being more consumed? So Josue, what you're saying about like This American Life and stuff, they probably still dominate on radio, but as Dave's saying, it's going to catch up. That's not going to remain likely. Yeah, it is at least going to balance.
It was probably a couple years ago. I remember Rob was talking about it, that NPR sent out a memo to their radio station saying, hey, can you kind of quit plugging the podcast? Because they needed people to listen on the radio because there were sponsors. And then I think they actually said, no, we didn't say that, but they had already kind of like, it was already leaked. But there was this weird little baby controversy about them promoting their podcast. And it was kind of like, well, that's kind of cool that they're getting more play on, or at least seem to be getting more attention on the podcast. I still don't know which one was getting more, but I just thought it was funny at the time. They're like, hey, hold on. We're still a radio station. So I thought it was kind of cool.
In the chat, apparently, say Beauty Bubble says Lily Singh, I think that's how you say it, is her name. And Bandrew says that a YouTuber coming to broadcast shows that there's a lot more money in television, even though the audience is significantly smaller. So we're waiting for that transition of advertisers to wake the F up, maybe, and put some money into the space where the eyeballs are actually seeing things. I guess she also did a podcast called Sheroic. So the first podcaster to get a late night show too.
TV show. There you go.
It's nice. Amazing. So it does cross over.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, because I've never really heard of her. I've never heard anything she'd done, but I'm assuming it's obviously very entertaining, and it'll be interesting to see how they take someone who's super creative. And again, I've never heard her, but I'm just guessing here, and somehow filter her into.
They asked her like, what is the show going to be like? And she said, it's basically just going to be my YouTube channel. Like they also said, she actually put out a video that said, I'm going to still like vlog and make YouTube videos of this stuff. And she kind of defiantly said, like, they're not going to stop me from still making this content that I make. And so I got the feeling that, while there is sort of this box you're put in when it comes to network type stuff, hopefully she's going to push the boundary on what that means. I hope.
Well, plus she's on at 1:30 in the morning.
It's not the best time slot, but hey.
But I mean, that's the thing I loved about like early David Letterman was the best, because he's dropping watermelons off a building. He's doing the suit of seltzer and Velcro and all the crazy stuff. And half the fun of it was like, look, nobody's watching. We're just going to do it anyway.
You know what I did? I was 14 years old. I would get a glass of milk that I would put in the freezer after I put it under water so it was icy, and grab like a stack of Chips Ahoy, get in bed, and watch David Letterman until way too late. And then I'd fake sick so I didn't have to go to school the next day. All because of Dave Letterman's late night show. So good luck, teenagers. Enjoy it.
Yeah. That'd be fun though. I'm excited to
I'm interested
to see what happens.
I didn't even know about it before, so
it's another fun one to watch.
Yeah, I'm rooting for success there. Not quite the same way I was rooting for success of the Gimlet TV shows, which I predicted would fail, and it did. I think it even went shorter than I thought it would. It's got to be good. It still has to be good, people. That was bad. High LPR 40 with no XLR cable in the bed. What are you doing?
It's crazy.
I don't know if that's true. All right, let's get another story in here. Who wants to pick?
Go ahead. You're the host.
We did Google's getting more women and people of color into podcasting. I mean, that story I just talked about really talks a lot about that. But Crazy Fast. Oh, I'm not the host. You're the co-host, Dave. So you override at any moment.
Did we do the getting more women and people of color into podcasting?
Yeah, no, we didn't do the article specifically. So let's go there. Josue, you have to tell us what this is about.
Yeah, so it's a Forbes article. So it's like, oh, they're talking about podcasting. Cool.
Right.
And
which I know, to be honest with you, as I interrupt, as I do, I know people, I talk too much. Just put it in the comments. I'm used to it. I'm a YouTuber. And then he forgets his thought. Wow. No, Forbes.
Oh, man.
Forbes. There's someone in on Twitter. She writes for Forbes a lot of times, and she's in podcasting. So I feel like we have an in there. We see a lot of articles. Anyways, go ahead.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
that was a useless point, by the way.
Well, the article is talking about in general about, the problem that, there isn't enough diversity in podcasting, not necessarily in podcasting in general, because obviously it talks about the low barrier of entry, but then the popular podcasts, right? It's all white dudes, right? It's like, where are the people of color and the women and, different countries and representation? And then it goes on to talk about a program that Google is running with PRX called the Google Podcast Creator Program. And I brought it up because I applied last year and I plan on applying now. It's open until April 14th. And I was just looking at the shows that were selected, and they received thousands of applications. And I don't know, I think it's funny, it's how Google is getting more women and people of color into podcasting, but it's like an incubator and only 6 shows were selected. So I don't know how much of a dent that makes into it when you only pick 6 shows. It's not like a training program in different languages for people. It's really an incubator, and you get $40,000 to make a show. And part of the application process is that you have to budget it out. And there was this there was a very long web conference where they were explaining how to do that. So I had never done this. I had never thought about doing a highly produced show, how much it would cost me. And I ended up with a budget of like $43,000 to do, I think it was like 12 episodes over the course of a year with travel and all these things, like a reported, narrated podcast with an editor. They were like, no, include a story editor. And it was interesting because, like, as an independent podcaster, they want me to think like NPR, like Gimlet, right? Like having a staff and a budget. And it was an interesting exercise. And I mean, it would be an amazing opportunity to be, to factor your salary into a podcast. Never been paid that way, So it's an interesting program. I think the choices were interesting, and apparently was pretty popular. And again, the article frames it as Google's way of trying to get more women and people of color into podcasting. I don't know, what do you all feel about that?
Well, you sound like it's not enough. Like it's to you. This is not a way to. When I hear that headline, it's kind of like, how do we get like a good influx? And to me, it makes me think they're looking for a big hit, right? So what makes more impact? Is it that if we pull alongside, if like there's the same number of women podcasting as men, does that make more impact than a woman-led show that is massively popular? I don't know. Like, if I'm speaking of women, I should ask Heather, what do you think? Like, what makes more impact? More women or minorities or ethnicities, whatever, in podcasting, or a massive show that has someone at the forefront that is not stereotypical?
The massive show is going to reach more people, obviously.
Yeah.
But then I think that the fact that there are low barriers to entry so people can create it, and there are communities like Lady Pod Squad and She Podcasts with Elsie Escobar, and there are like a whole bunch of people helping and supporting women and different people from different countries and cultures and all that to find their voice and help them through the journey. So yeah, I think a bigger show will allow more people to realize that, hey, maybe this is something that I could do.
I've never heard of Lady Pod Squad. I just wrote that down. I was like, all right.
Okay. Yeah.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, it's an awesome community.
In the chat, it was cleared up that Sarah Ray Warner. I knew it was Sarah. I didn't know the whole name. She writes for Forbes, and she's optioned. She didn't write that one, but that's what I was thinking about exactly.
I will say, as someone who's not been to the Forbes website in a long time, holy cow, is that a bunch of crap when you go over there?
Yeah,
It's like
I went to the
8
link
million
too, and
pop-ups, and I'm
yeah.
like, holy cow.
At least the
heck?
video audio was off.
Yeah,
Jeez,
thank
that would have been a problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
when you live on ads, and the horrible thing is that like banner ads and web, that's still a thing. Like we talked about, advertisers still giving more money to television side, even though there's potentially less viewership, and people still want to buy a banner on your website. You're like, yeah, that'll do you a lot of good.
Yeah.
Like I actually want you to perform well if I'm going to take your ad, but it's just we're in flux.
Yeah. Yeah, Forbes even has like a pre-roll, basically. Like it'll have a whole page with a quote. It's not even an ad sometimes. But this article, one thing that it made me think about was how like they're giving you the $40,000, but it is an incubator in a way, but I don't think they're getting any money from it. They're just trying to give you all the tools that you need and the funding to have the show. And then basically like they'll support you, but they're not getting anything on the back end. You're not a part of the PRX network. You're not like a part of the Google network or anything like that. They're just giving you the money, giving you the tools, and then you're on your way. So I don't know.
So
I think
is that actual support, or do they just want to appear like they're supporting the, you know what I mean? Like they're given an opportunity to launch a big show. But
yeah, I mean, you have to go for training in Boston.
Yeah.
There are, big name people from NPR and other networks that will help you. So it's really, I don't know. It feels like, if you're an independent podcaster, or actually someone in the chat mentioned that they did pick some existing shows already, which is kind of discouraging too, because like one of the options is you have an idea, and there are certain shows that like the show I'm going to submit is not like, I can't do it without funding, right? There would be just no way that I could possibly do that show and travel and take up all that time to make that type of show. So I'm not even going to start it unless something like that happened. So I don't know.
Feels like they're giving you a giant telescope and telling you to find aliens. Good luck. Where's the support, man? Can I be funded for the entire project, and will you support me in that mission of
I just want to take the 40 grand, spend about $80 on a 2100 and do my podcast and enjoy the other 39,800 and whatever. I'll take it.
Well, I mean, we've talked about like Gimlet and other places, like there's a staff, we talked about radio, that those are completely different monsters.
When I went to the On Air Fest in New York City, I was amazed because normally I go to these things. I'm like, hey, what brings you to the show? And it's usually like, oh, I do a show. And then another person, oh, I do a show. And another person, I went to that thing. It's like, oh, I'm the one person. I'm a storyboard person. That was their job. I do storyboards. And another person was like an editor. And an editor in that world is the person you dump 5 hours of content on and go, here, shape that into a story. And I was like, wow, this is, like you said, totally different ball game, different, almost like a different, it's still content creation, but just on a totally different style and a totally different budget.
It's funny because that for years, like one of my things I've been giving talks at conferences and stuff has been about turning your hobby into profession. This is what I did, right? So if you're doing a podcast, that there are more and more jobs as we go along down this journey where you can make it your job. And it's not just like from a content perspective, like, I have a show, I'll sell it. It's you have skills. You've learned skills, like skills of production, and there are opportunities for you. And I've always called myself a lot of times a podcast producer throughout the years, but this term means nothing like of the way I was using it for years, because there are a lot of podcast out from Gimlet, from all these networks, right? More traditional media. And what this means, if I wanted to apply to that job, I'm like, oh, I'm a podcast producer. I do the tech stuff. I do the editing. I do, what we're going to do for you is give you a job where you sit in a room and maybe you collaborate in like board meetings, but you're creating stories. I need you to write stories. I need you to come up with concept. It's all about the content. So it's very interesting as we see the sort of the industry shift and more of these traditional companies come in and just even just terms like that, it just completely changes the way it is. Like you said, editor, like most of what I do is editing, but that's not podcast producer in what that's becoming. So there are jobs available, But
I specifically put a story editor in my budget, which is not
Yeah.
even like the technical editor. Like I would still
Right.
cut things up, but this is the person who's going to tell me, no, the story flows better. The
Yes.
narrative goes
How
better
much?
if you do it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stephanie has a great point in the chat room. She says, I think more female voices would be more encouraging. One popular female podcast can be seen as the exception, but many of them would make it seem like, well, then anybody can do it. And I said, absolutely. And if you can be a woman of color, double that, because, you know, that would just be awesome to see more people in that. And it's one of those things where anytime you have somebody, whether it's one of my favorite examples is, Heather Radke does Adoptees On. And that's not a race thing, but it's the only people that understand what it's like to be adopted are adopted people. So if you're, you know, the only people that know what it's like to be a woman of a color is probably another woman of color. So it's nice to, and a lot of times that you may be feeling like I'm the only person going through this. And when you hear somebody else saying, no, I have the same struggles and I'm putting up the same BS, now you have that community feeling and you can connect with those people.
And
Can
if
I
you go
just
on
say-
Twitter and look up, I'm sorry, Heather, let me just real quick. There's someone called Barry. She does @podcasts in color on Twitter, and she has a full directory of podcasts with hosts of people of color. And I'm just thinking, like, if you're doing 6 shows at $40,000, not even counting all the other stuff, like $240,000, just you could help a lot of really good shows that already exist with like a marketing budget, just like help them reach more people, get in front of more people. And like, because there are already so many good shows out there. I don't know. Sorry, Heather, for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. I was just going to say that that's when things like She Podcasts, which are going to have their event that they're working towards fundraising, or the Kickstarter campaign at the moment, is incredible, because that is a bigger group of people that will help inspire more women rather than being just one particular women-led podcast, and the group like Lady Pod Squad as well to help those. Yeah.
Josue, what was the Twitter account that you said of the woman?
It's her name is it's Barry, and I think it's @podcasts in color.
Podcasts in color. Cool. Yeah. And speaking of that, if you go to shepodcast.com/Kickstarter, you can help fund that great event happening in Atlanta, Georgia. And I did find out today that while it is geared towards females, if you are a male, you can still attend. So being single, I might do that. Wait, that sounds really creepy.
Yeah,
that's
right.
No.
Like, this is why they should not.
This is why they have female only.
This is why. Yeah. Just lock the doors, man.
Yeah, exactly.
It's more productive.
And I also messed up. I said it was Heather Radke. It's not. It's Haley Radke. So thank you, Emily Prokop from The Story Behind, for correcting me.
Yeah, we have like a chat room co-host. Emily is, she's like de facto co-host here. She's been on several rounds, but she's just kicking butt in the chat. Thank you, Emily.
And she's a great singer.
What? Is that her?
So that is, yes. So anytime anybody says hi LPR40 on the Ask the Podcast Coach show, I have to. So yeah, there we go.
Oh my God. You want to see
She's
my
also nominated for a Webby Award.
Yes.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
Nice.
Shout out to Emily.
Yeah.
You want to see my How Up Here 40? Let me get it. Oh, it's like it's in a
yeah.
safe.
See, every time it's no. Okay, enough of that.
Yeah, it's not. Bandrew will appreciate my SM7B. Everyone should watch. If you don't want to consume the whole round like Josue, he just refuses to watch the video. That's okay. It's fine. If you don't want to do that, you should check out. You should at least just look at it. You can see all the variety of microphones. We know we're all gearheads here. We have all different microphones to offer. Quite a diversification of podcast tech.
I'll watch it, but at 2x, just not at 1x. That's it.
You can do that.
Yeah.
Apparently. I'm going to do that and be horrified at the results.
Yeah,
all right.
Probably.
Yeah, but it's okay. I'm going to do it with you and watch you at 2 times 5. Take that this way. All right. Hey, I think we can cram in one more story. Let's do this sleep timer thing, Heather. I'm a little curious about this because I think it exists in the podcast app I have. And much like the fast forward, or the hyperspeed. What do they call that? What's the technical name for listening at 2 times? What do they call that function? You guys don't even know.
It's just speed.
That's how
I think it's just
impersonal
speed.
it is. You don't even know its name.
It's just speed, man. Just speed. That's it.
Speed sounds like a drug. It's a drug. Don't
It's
do
it.
it, kids. Don't do podcast drugs.
It's the only way
All
to
right.
It's the only way to listen.
Yeah, they
You're a
just
pusher. It's a
in that
pusher.
in that one article, it just calls it super fast speed.
Yeah,
so
see, I don't even have.
we need some really obnoxious fast word with the word pod somehow crammed into it to make it
Well,
really obnoxious.
There's an obnoxious word in that article. The article calls people who listen to podcast fast podfasters, and I
Boom.
refuse.
There we
repeat
go.
That
There,
ever
I
again.
knew it.
Yeah,
You deserved it. You
Never again.
deserve it, you podfasters. That sounds so
Stop
derogatory.
it.
That sounds like a name. It's like a curse word.
That's it.
Hey,
you podfaster.
podfaster. Podfasters. Just get off
But
my
then would people
lawn.
get confused with fasting, which is like giving up something too? I don't think
Yeah.
that's such the
You're
best
giving
thing.
up podcasts.
that's a good point.
I will if you make me listen.
That's
to it.
hilarious.
We'll podcast.
I
will
knew they
podcast
were
on you.
somehow. I knew they somehow were going to cram the word pod into something. You have to. It's like
Of course.
that drives me nuts.
That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. Sleep timer. What's that about, Heather?
So I picked this because of the first article about the listening fast, and I thought it was interesting, another sort of function that apps could have. And I don't know if it is rolled out everywhere, but apparently a possible feature is coming to Google Podcast that is a sleep timer. And it apparently references 3 increments, 2 of which are related to episodes and the ability to close the UI. But yeah, I've listened to podcasts and fallen asleep before and then woken up because I've still got something in my ears playing. So
I do that every night. You know what? Actually, I do this every night. Like I have AirPods, so it's just a little this without the wire, and I put it in the ear, and I will go to sleep. Typically, a lot of times to a podcast, and of course, it just plays after I fall asleep. I don't set any kind of timer or cut it off. And you know what? I think like an hour into sleep, I will wake back up, and then I catch myself listening to it like another half hour. What? That's really bad. Like these like smile lines are not from smiles. They're just like I'm not getting sleep and I'm getting old. Like it's probably a bad thing. I could probably use this. Does anyone use this currently?
I've tried it, but my problem is I have depending on what playlist I have, it would blow through my whole playlist. So I'd wake up and I'm like, I didn't hear any of the show. So if I ever tried that, I would put the sleep timer on, but I would also tell it to stop after it got done listening to the latest episode. I was using Overcast for that because I would wake up. I'm like, my whole playlist is gone. I slept through the whole thing. So that wasn't good for me.
Here's the thing. If Marco, and he's the one who can do this, if he can implement a feature where my AirPod, I mean, this happens on the watch. The watch knows what you're doing. The AirPod should know when I go to sleep based on my rhythms, right? Like it should know, oh, Ray's falling asleep, shut the podcast off. That'll save my health. I appreciate that. So, because here's the thing with the timer, I'm just scared and lazy because if I set a timer, it's going to stop playing while I'm listening. And then I'm like, I'm trying to go to sleep and I got to start it up again on my phone.
Yeah.
That's a really good idea because I use a sleep app religiously. And once your heart rate hits a certain point, it marks you off. It marks you as asleep. So maybe like an overall, like, do not disturb, this guy's asleep function.
Yeah. I think AirPod, the 3rd generation, which will take 2 years to come out. Like, I don't even know. Maybe AirPods in some way work together with an app. We know we can get the watch app. I know we can get. I'm being Apple here. Show my bias, I guess. But I'm sure it's doable. Or even hey, that's it. Like on a watch, doesn't have to be Apple. The watch knows when you sleep. Shut off my podcast.
Yeah. I do. I use a lot of smart playlists on the Overcast app. So my playlists tend to be shorter. So sometimes I've had that problem where it goes through a full playlist. But Overcast does have a sleep timer. And when I usually use it is when I'm listening to Audible. So an audiobook, sometimes I'm like, okay, tonight I'm just going to listen to this audiobook. And I kind of know, I'm like, let me just give it a good 30 minutes and take it from there. And usually that's enough. Like I know when it's coming. Like if the lights are off, my head is on the pillow, I know I'm probably not going to last more than 30 minutes, no matter what the book is. So I do use it in Audible.
It sounds like most of this roundtable will go to sleep to a podcast, at least sometimes.
No, I can't.
I'm on my second set of AirPods because my first one's just like the battery wouldn't last more than 15 minutes because I use it every day, all day.
I've heard there's an issue with that. I have had no issues, but I hear that you can have that happen.
Yeah. Stephanie has the same thing I do, and I can't spell it either. Tendinitis. My ears ring all the time.
That's because you played music.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yes. If it's too loud, you're too old, man. So that comes back to haunt you. So I have a like a white noise generator thing, because the problem is if I then turn up the podcast loud enough to hear it over the white noise generator, then it's so loud that I then pay attention to it and I can't fall asleep.
AirPods, Dave. You need AirPods.
Someday when I'll have to take that check I get from.
There's like $15 versions. They have cheaper.
Are they really? Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I'm sure. Maybe they'll break, but whatever.
Yeah. Lasted long enough for me to fall asleep, so that'd be cool.
That's right. Heather.
Tying the speed thing into the sleep timer, Bandrew said that he uses the speed and lowers it to 0.5x and then sets a sleep timer for 30 minutes. So if someone's drawling out what you're listening to, it could help
That's
you
good.
fall asleep, and you might shut off at 30 minutes.
That's
Nice.
a good one. Yeah.
You listen to the
Thank you.
Sleep With Me podcast, which is
Right.
already designed to make you go to sleep and then slow it down. Now we have some actual health benefits that I could use. I'm going to look younger in the next roundtable. I don't think that's possible without some type of surgery, which I'm not getting today because I don't have a big podcast budget. I'm gonna make it big in podcasting so I can get a facelift. How's that?
There you go.
Because if we're gonna keep doing this video thing, can't keep getting older.
That is the nice thing about doing audio only.
Yeah.
It's like you're like ZZ Top. I mean, ZZ Top, they have their costume. They basically have hats, sunglasses, and beards. So they're going to look like that when they're 40, 50, 60. It doesn't matter. They don't change. So that's the nice thing about an audio podcast, unless your voice really changes and all of a sudden you're welcome to Podcasters Roundtable. Yeah, it's like, that's going to sound a little different.
It's amazing how
And you can speed it up.
Yeah, right. You can change. It seems amazing that voices, I don't know, your voice does it really change? You could be.
Yeah.
Does it?
It does. My voice is already, I don't know, it's because I'm just talking all the time now, but my voice is not a lot, but a little lower than it was 14 years ago when I listened to the early stuff. It's like the difference between here and just up a little bit. And if you listen to early versions of Howard Stern, it doesn't sound like Howard Stern. He sounds like this. Hey, welcome to, WNBC. And then by the end, now he's like this. So, or if you take Lucille Ball, Lucille Ball was Lucille Ball. And by the time she was old, it was like she sounded like Darth Vader.
I mean, listen to the first Aerosmith album and it would get nothing.
Exactly.
But I don't think that has anything to do with age. Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
Nice.
Turn this into a classic rock show. All right. Hey, I think we're good. That was some good stuff. We had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. This was a good time.
Yeah.
I think the key is to be unorganized. That's exactly, and invite people late. So
that's it.
I'm really glad I made it. Thank you.
I'm
great
glad
to
I
have
saw
you.
the chat. Way to get in the chat. And then I saw that you weren't getting in. I realized I messed it up. I'm sorry. But that's it. That gets you another trip back to the roundtable just for that alone.
That'd be awesome.
No, yeah, you guys did great. I mean, it's not an audition, but I don't know that we've had a roundtable where I was like, let's not invite them back. It's not how
That's
it
true.
works. But most people are so good. That's what's so fun about this show. I swear, the chat is always finding new shows to listen to. I'm like, I got to check out Heather's show because I'm going to put my cabin in the woods and bail out of society. But I can still podcast apparently because she's doing it fine. So
Yeah,
I'm
you just
excited.
have to be careful of the internet connection thing. That is an issue here, and I'm in New Zealand, so it's even worse. So,
But you've
yeah.
done video. We can't
Yeah.
bring Elsie on. You can forget about it because she's somewhere. She's like satellite, and she'll tell you, no, I can't. I mean, she probably can, but I know that she struggles. She's in an area where internet. Now, is it because of the internet that you have there, or is it because of the power that you're on?
The internet that I have here, I'm rural as well, so
Yeah.
it's trying to send a signal across airwaves rather than a
Wow.
cable.
It's done a good job. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not we've had plenty of roundtablers where we had to hey, just shut off your video. We'll take the audio. That'll work.
Yeah.
So we just get still image. All right, cool. Well, let us know where we can find your podcast. And then we'll get out of here. Dave, again, thanks.
Yeah, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting. Find me at schoolofpodcasting.com.
Very cool. And Heather, first roundtable. Hopefully you enjoyed it. You'll be back as we just established. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm Heather Welch from Sunshine and Power Cuts, and that's at sunshineandpowercuts.com.
What time is it where you're at?
That is a good question. Nearly 2:00 in the afternoon.
2:00 in the afternoon. And we're doing this at almost 6 p.m. on the West Coast in California. So,
And I'm a
we're-
day ahead.
and a day ahead. She's in the future. I love it. Keeping that, we're doing pretty good, Dave, at bringing on people from across the globe. We are a
Yeah.
global medium, so I'm pretty stoked about that. So thank you for joining. It worked out. Like actually, this works out this time, so we got to have more people in that time zone on. That's cool. Sometimes it's really tough. I know Stephanie in the chat now. I think she's in China.
Yeah, she
Not sure.
is.
And so I don't even know what time it is there. So we're gonna get her on. So that might be harder to do. I know the UK is rough because it's like it's like 2 in the morning or something. So all right, I need to bend more, Dave. We need to shift this time so we can accommodate
So,
more.
We'll do one at 2 a.m, so somebody can.
That's fair. That is fair. International Podcast Day. Maybe we can get into that 2 a.m. slot in the 24-hour broadcast. Awesome. All right,
Sign
Dave, if you're
up.
listening to that, we're on. We're
Yeah.
on. And Josue, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Josue Cardona from Geek Therapy at geektherapy.com. And by the way, I'm in Puerto Rico right now. And I'm going to touch base with Heather because I once recorded with no power and I still published an episode. I managed to do it with a cell phone and a H6. It was a lot of fun.
Well, that's
That
cool.
sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now I got people in the chat already emailing you. How'd you do that? What's your setup?
Yeah.
Should I buy an
Exactly.
H6?
Yeah, exactly. What mic did you use?
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone. Podcastersroundtable.com/guest will get you to a sign up page, which then it'll get you to a list, which everyone here has used. And then eventually it'll get you onto the roundtable. But I don't really know that you want to be on the roundtable unless you sign up there. So that's the way to do it. Podcastersroundtable.com/guest. And we'll see you for 129 next time. Wave goodbye. See you later. I can't make it stop.